It seems crazy to think that it's almost 3 years since Tesla CEO Elon Musk unveiled the Model Y to the world. The Model Y is, in effect, an SUV version of the Model 3. And that means that you get a bit more space inside, but a bit more weight as well, so you're not quite as much range. But you do still get, and believe me, you do still get all the performance that you're used to with every Tesla model. Now, the thing that we do need to talk about, though, is that when this car was unveiled, there wasn't much in the way of rivals. And now, if you fast forward from March 2019 to today, the market is awash with rivals in this segment. So the question is the Model Y the no-brainer that the Model 3 has been for all this time? Let's find out.
Like all of Tesla's cars, it's hard to mistake the Model Y for anything else on the road, apart from that is the Model 3. It's not so much a condensed version of the bigger Model X SUV, but rather a progression of the Model 3's design, with a chunkier body and a taller roof to give it that all-important SUV stance. So far, 2 versions of the Model Y have been confirmed for the UK, both featuring the maker's familiar dual-motor all-wheel drive setup. The car we have here is the Model Y Long Range, which, priced from $54,990, claims a range of 315 miles. Above it sits a performance variant costing an extra £10,000. It'll do 298 miles, but the extra power and performance parts means it'll sprint from 0 to 62 in just 3.5 seconds.
Now, while we're on the subject of performance, we might as well talk about what this car is like to drive. You see, anyone who's sat in a Model 3 or even seen pictures of Model 3 will find this interior very familiar, but there are subtle differences in the way these two cars drive. Performance, well, yeah, performance is astounding. 0 to 62 miles an hour, even in this middle-of-the-road long-range model, takes 4.8 seconds, which is pretty much quicker than any of this car's rivals. Okay, I get it, you're probably going to use that power once a week at most, and then you're going to favour range and efficiency, but it's good to know it's there. The dual motors means that traction is very good and grip is decent through the corners. The steering, really quick. I think it's something like 2 turns lock to lock, which is pretty much unheard of. But the problem is it's pretty much completely devoid of feel and feedback. So the fact this car weighs 2 tons means that it doesn't feel as agile as that swift steering would suggest it should. The added weight over the Model 3 means that Tesla have had to stiffen the Model Y's suspension, which means it's just not as comfortable. That's probably made worse, I admit, by our car's 20-inch wheels. It's fine on the motorway on smooth roads, but it's pulled apart a bit by broken British B roads. It's just not as comfortable as its sibling. But while the Model Y can't match a Ford Mustang Mach-E or even a Skoda Enyaq in the corners, it more than gives them a run for their money when it comes to refinement. There's pretty much no wind noise, road noise is kept in check, even on these larger wheels. So if you remove ride from the equation, it's actually a really relaxing car to drive. And it's at this point that you may want to lean on some of the Tesla's autonomous drive functions. Now, this is not an autonomous car in no way, shape or form. I will set that straight from the outset. You always need to keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road in front. Would I trust it in my life? No, I would not. Is it smooth? Yes, it is. But it just takes some of that stress and strain out of those boring, everyday, mundane journeys.
Efficiency is pretty good for a 2-ton SUV. We saw 300 relatively easy miles from our long-range model, but if you thought the driving experience was stress-free, then just try charging the thing. The supercharger network remains one of the brand's USPs. While Musk has suggested he will open it up to third parties, meaning you might soon see BMWs and Audis clogging up the charge bays, for now it is exclusive to Tesla drivers. There are loads of sites in the UK and Europe with speeds of up to 250 kilowatts. That means recharging is, quite literally, rapid. Topping up to 80% takes just over half an hour, and while you're waiting, you're free to explore the Model Y's other USP, its interior.
All right, I'll pause that. Okay, enough of that. This is probably another thing that after you've used it a few times, maybe whilst you're charging, you're probably going to file it under the nice to have rather than the essential column. But if you put the video games and the whoopee cushion function to one side, this infotainment system in the Model Y is still one of the best in the business. If you're coming from Model 3, then everything in here will feel largely familiar. If you're coming from a petrol, diesel or hybrid car, or indeed any one of the Model Y's countless rivals, then it may not. You see, you don't get a conventional instrument cluster behind the steering wheel. Instead, everything, and I mean everything, is controlled and viewed through this huge 15-inch touchscreen in the middle. And I don't just mean your radio, your nav, your phone connectivity. I mean your lights, your wipers, your speed, your seat controls. Everything is buried within that screen somewhere. But while that might usually strike the fear of God into you, it's actually really intuitive. You don't get Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, but you get Google Maps. That's really intuitive, really easy to use, and it just operates exactly like an iPad, and it's really responsive. You might have to get used to looking left, or in our case, because this is a left-hand drive car, looking right to see your speed on the screen, but it's pretty much in your peripheral vision, so after a few miles it doesn't feel like too much of a departure from what we know. Quality on the whole is very good, especially considering some of the issues that we found on early Teslas in the past. It certainly feels befitting of its 50+ grand price tag.
Long-range models come pretty well equipped, and actually most of the changes to the performance spec cars are related to, you guessed it, performance. As standard, therefore, you get electrically operated heated leather seats and a heated steering wheel, a full-length panoramic roof, and that super responsive 15-inch infotainment screen. You get 19-inch wheels on the long-range car, upgraded to 21s on the performance. In addition, the more expensive models get bigger brakes, lower suspension, and a higher top speed.
This is the 5-seat Model Y. There is a 7-seat version, but it's not quite clear yet whether or not that car will come to the UK. Regardless, the 2 seats are going to go back there in the boot, and if you're looking at the sloping roofline and how much space you've got back there, it's not going to be useful for anything other than really small kids. Different story up here though. For 5 seats, you've got loads of knee room, loads of headroom, just a really spacious cabin. You've got ISOFIX points on the outer seats and a couple of USB ports as well.
It's hard to judge the Model Y against its competitors when it comes to boot space, at least on paper. That's because the figures Tesla offers are measured up to the roofline, whereas rivals are often just to the parcel shelf. That said, it's a much bigger load area than you'll find in a Mercedes EQA, and easily a match for the larger models in this class. I'm thinking Enyaq or Volkswagen ID.4. Furthermore, like the Mustang Mach-E, there's an additional 117 litres in the nose, which is perfect for storing the charging cables.
It isn't perfect, but once again, the Model Y sets the benchmark that all of its rivals have to meet. Space, efficiency, that slick infotainment system. Musk has nailed all of these areas and more, leaving legacy car makers struggling to keep up. But it's here, more so than on the Model 3, that Tesla's roots as a tech company rather than a car maker really make themselves known. You see, in an SUV body, it's much harder to disguise the weight, and almost counterintuitively, the higher suspension is actually stiffer and therefore the car is less comfortable. This thing, no, it's not perfect, but it's pretty blooming good.
Head to DrivingElectric.com for all the latest electric and hybrid car advice, news and reviews, and check us out on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Finally, while you're here, make sure you hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel and turn on notifications to ensure you never miss a video.